Hey, Kyle.
Hey, I am fixing myself a quick glass of water and I'll be right
Okay,
over there. You.
I'm good. I'm great. I'm glad we're doing this. I'm so excited to start the season 3 of American Shade with someone I've known literally for like 20 years. I think we met in elementary school, right? Like
Yeah,
during
yeah,
the
it was
summer
like way
program.
back in the day.
Yeah, back in the day, we went to the same high school, grew up in Columbus, Indiana together. And what's also cool is that we're both journalists in different
Yes.
fields, but we both are. You're a reporter at Local 12 in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I'm wondering, can you tell us a little bit about how you got there? And also another part of the question is, we've come from Columbus, Indiana, and it's a very small city. And if we say
Mhm.
to someone like we come from Columbus, they think Ohio. Like they don't even
Oh my gosh.
Indiana. They're like, what's that?
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
did that actually help with your passion of wanting to like go somewhere else outside of Columbus and pursue journalism? Or did that actually like make you a little fearful because we come from such a small space?
Yeah. Wonderful questions to open up with. And I want to start by saying thank you for allowing me to come onto your platform and to have this dialogue and this conversation. I have a lot of respect for the work that you are doing and all of the people that you are impacting through your work right now. So hats off to you. But I got involved in journalism and the news industry in high school at Columbus East High School. Growing up, I always say that I think my mom was trying to punish me because instead of watching Saved by the Bell cartoons in the morning, she made me watch the news. And I really fell in love with it. So what she thought was going to be a punishment, like, oh, sit here and watch the news so you're not distracted, ended up really fueling my interest and my love for the news business.
Mm-hmm.
So I was on the Oracle, which is the newspaper at East, and then did the Olympian Flame for a year, and I really fell in love with the broadcast journalism side of the business. I like to talk to people, I like to tell stories, and that's really what journalism at its core is about: talking to people, interacting, and telling their stories.
Mm-hmm.
So it really was a perfect fit. So I went to Butler University, go Dogs, majored in journalism there, and really found that I love this, love this, love this. I want to pursue it. But I learned about writing. I learned about shooting video. I learned about editing. I learned about being impartial, right? And making sure that I'm representing all sides in the story.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I think a lot of people forget is that journalists do go to journalism school, right? Like there is a very specific set of skills that you need to have to do this job well.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to go to journalism school. And I don't want to say that all journalists go to journalism school, but people forget that we do go to journalism school. And from there, I was honored to receive a fellowship that allowed me to go to Washington, D.C. and work for NBC News for a year, which was 2012. So it was leading up to that election that I went there. I worked for Meet the Press. I worked in the political unit. And then I also worked in the newsroom there and just got so many different experiences covering, the inauguration, some of the protests that were happening at that time. So it was a really good experience. Came back home to Indiana, worked in Terre Haute for about a year and a half. And that's when I realized that I really liked the reporter anchor role.
Mm-hmm.
So from Terre Haute, I went to Indianapolis and worked at Fox 59 for 3 years, which is still one of the defining moments in my professional career because I got to report the news in essentially my hometown. Indianapolis is obviously north of Columbus, but it was just incredible to do that and to be able to report on stories that really mattered to me, to be in Columbus and to report on news that's happening there. And it was an interesting time to be in Indianapolis because I was there as Mike Pence ascended to the vice presidency. And because of that, I got to go to Washington, D.C. and cover the inauguration. And the next day, the Women's March, which was just an unbelievable experience. I still tell people I've never seen so many people as I saw at the Women's March. And then after that, I realized that I wanted to go into anchoring full time. And so I have an opportunity right now to be the evening anchor here at Local 12, the CBS affiliate. So right now I'm anchoring the 5, the 6, and the 11 o'clock shows. And it's really stretching me as a journalist and as a professional, because I tended to be a little bit more on the lighter side of the news in Indianapolis, working on a morning show, and now I'm on the more hard side of the news, anchoring the evening show. So it's been a really good experience. It's been a really good experience, and I love it every single day, which I always tell people, if you don't love it, it's not worth it.
That is so true. And that whole journey sounds amazing. I'm just like, yes, like I need to take some notes. You said a couple of things that's interesting. One, that your exposure to like your passion was at a young age. Like what specifically, what shows were you watching, or who were you watching? Or was it just watching news like sparked something inside you?
It really was just watching news in general. I can remember growing up in Columbus, watching Wish TV, Channel 8, Debbie Knox, and I believe it was Bob Ahern, were like this dynamic, old school, journalism powerhouse. And then a little later, I can remember watching Andrea Moorhead, who is the main anchor at WTHR Channel 13. And it's interesting now. I look back and I see that I didn't see a lot of black and brown faces. Andrea Moorhead is a beautiful black woman who does an amazing job, and I mentioned her, but I didn't see a ton of black faces on the news. And I don't know that that's necessarily why I went into it. I don't think it is. But it's something that I am aware of now. And I take this platform very seriously, because I know that at a young age, I can maybe show something to a young man or a young woman here in Cincinnati who may turn on the news and say, hey, there's somebody who looks like me.
Right.
And so it is something that I'm aware of.
Yeah. And you said something else that you were more used to doing like lighter news, and now that in the evening spot you're doing more like harder news, so to speak. And you were dead on. If you don't love journalism, whether it's being a reporter or print or whatever, then you're not cut out for this. Like it's hard work. But with you though, like I've seen some of your segments, and you literally look like you love what you're doing. Even when I see that you are talking about the hard stuff, like you have this empathy with that, and then this charisma with other things. So I can tell that you are aligned, like with what you're supposed to be doing. But what hurdles do you find that you go through as a journalist? Because I think people get kind of confused with journalists, is if we post something on social media or if we report on something, they assume that's our perspective or our opinion. And it's like, no, we're just mouthpieces to the truth. This isn't necessarily something that we might affiliate with, but it's our job. So do you find hurdles with that? People taking on your persona as the things that you report on?
So I think the biggest hurdle that I find currently, and I think a lot of it has to do with the current political climate that we're seeing, is that people are just really nasty and unnecessarily rude. And I think that this whole narrative of fake news, and I think it comes from both sides, right? I don't think it's just Republicans. I think Democrats have a role in this as well. If you say something that someone doesn't necessarily agree with, instead of actually reading the article and understanding or watching the story, instead of doing that and understanding where maybe that point of view is coming from, they immediately want to jump on the news organization and say, fake news, you guys are doing a disservice to the public. Or just like everyone else in the world, journalists make mistakes.
Right.
And I made a mistake last week with a story. We corrected the mistake, but before that happened, I had someone email me and my news director, who is essentially my boss, and say that I should be fired and I'm, fake news, and that he was going to tell the FCC. And it was like, I didn't make the mistake intentionally. So I think that right now in this political climate that we're in, there's this idea or this narrative that journalists are trying to put out into the universe or put out into the world, like incorrect information. Like it benefits us, and it doesn't, right? So it makes no sense.
Exactly.
And so I think that instead of giving people a little bit of grace, and again, I believe that journalists should be as factually sound as they can be. But
Yeah.
mistakes do happen.
Yeah.
They should not happen often, but they do
Right.
happen.
Exactly.
But instead of giving someone grace and saying like, oh yeah, you made that mistake, you're going to run a retraction or you're going to go on air and acknowledge that mistake. It's like, you did it on purpose. You were trying to spew hatred. You were trying to do this. You were trying to do that. And I'm like, actually, sir, I wasn't. I just misspoke.
Exactly.
You know, and I think that for me is one of the biggest hurdles that I see right now, because people are just so mad at each other. They just want to fight.
It's like this climate is very polarized. So yeah, I mean, with Trump's rhetoric since 2016 when he succeeded the Oval Office from Obama, it's been everything that's not for me is fake. So if a journalist says something that's not for Trump, they're like, oh, that's fake news, and they'll just, there's no grace. But let's go to something, I guess, more positive. We talked about the hurdles. Like, what's one or two things that, and you talked about, you know, certain things about your passion beforehand, but what are a couple of things that like makes you love the job no matter what hardships you face? Like, what about, like, just remembering, like, I love this job, but what are those things?
I think what I love the most about this job is really the ability that I have to shine a light on people, places, events, things that otherwise may not have gotten that moment. Excuse me. I'm actually working on a story right now about a woman who started the first community health center in Ohio in Lincoln Heights, which is an amazing community, predominantly Black. And she's retiring. She's 83 years old, but she's been the CEO for 53 years, right? And so I'm able to shine a light on her and kind of give her the fanfare and give her this moment that she deserves after leading an organization for 53 years. So to give her this moment to say thank you for all the work that she has done in this community, to me, that's why I got into journalism, right? Like I got into journalism to tell people's stories that otherwise would not be told. So that's what I really love to do. I love to get out into the community and interact with people, because that's when you really learn about a community. And that's when you learn where the need is in terms of journalism. And I think that something that people often don't realize is that the best journalists are people who are the best connected in their communities. That's where you get your best tips. That's where you get your best sources. And you really have to have a pulse. You have to have the pulse of the community that you're serving. So I love to be out doing whatever it is in Cincinnati, getting to know people and kind of better understanding the community that I'm serving, because journalism is an act of public service, and we are of service to these communities. And so I think that's also something that's important for us to remember. Something else that I love about my job is that every day is different. Every single day is different. I don't think I would do well at a job where I sat behind a desk and was like on a computer all the time. It just wouldn't be for me. Like if it works for you all, I'm so happy that it does. But it just doesn't really work for me. And so I go into work at 2:00 every day, most days. But I never know what the day is really going to entail. Even more so when I was reporting full time. Now that I anchor the majority of the time, I know what my day is going to look like, but I don't know what it's going to feel like. I don't know anything like that. And for instance, you and I were supposed to have this conversation a week ago, but I got home from the gym and I had an email from my boss saying, hey, Danielle Cameron's going to make an announcement in the Breonna Taylor decision. We need you to be in here by 12:30. And so, I mean, I'm sweaty coming from the gym and I'm like, hey, I got to cancel this. I got to do this. I got to figure out what we're going to do. And so there's an adrenaline that comes with that. You know what I'm saying? Like every day right before the 5 o'clock, there's like, I kind of pinch myself. It's like, am I really doing this? Like I worked and worked and worked for this moment. And so it's kind of weird when you do it on a daily basis. And I get excited just thinking about it again. But I love it.
I'm like, you're like ready to go right now. You're like, let's go to work. Yeah, that's awesome. I agree with all of that. And I always say like the two things that make a great journalist, like it's similar to what you said, like curiosity and honesty. And that does tie in with being connected with your community, because I find that when you are, you know, if there is a story out there that you might not know about, people might come to you to tell it because they trust you. So Yeah, you're totally right. It's like we have this. It's a type of activism. You know, I feel like activism for the people of our
Right.
country. So I guess on a more, I don't know if it's a harder question, but while you're a journalist, you're also a Black man. So, and whether you, and I know a lot of Black journalists that don't like to identify as being a Black journalist. They just are like, I'm a journalist, which either way is fine. It's not, nothing is wrong with that. But I know when I went to school, one, I had this inkling about certain things when I was doing Black Lives Matter about how certain news outlets were reporting stuff. And I felt like certain media platforms were being, you know, nonpartisan and was being pretty fair. But then there's always those others that were like very heavily biased with what they were saying. So then going to NYU and you're behind the scenes and you see how that type of things can work and how important and why it's so important that they teach us the ethical codes and being an ethical journalist and stuff like that, because it's so easy to manipulate the public. Like what we say,
Very true. Very true.
it is, you know, kind of like Bible, what we say. So with that said, someone being a journalist and then dually someone being a Black man, what are your thoughts about race and racism now that you're behind the scenes within media? Because we know like Ida B. Wells talked about those who do the crimes, write the reports. Not that journalists are the ones doing it, but that was one reason why she wanted to become a journalist, because she wanted to report the facts. So do you think that you have a different perception of how racism works within race relations within America now that you're a journalist behind the scenes and this is your profession?
So I think initially what I want to respond to this question by saying unconscious bias is real, right? And so I see that in a newsroom when we talk about the pictures that we run. And I'm not talking about my newsroom specifically, I'm talking about newsrooms across America in the sense that a lot of times when someone is killed, whether that be in a shooting, whether it be in a stabbing, the picture that news organizations will sometimes use to identify that individual is a mugshot, right? And if that individual is a Black man, that only, or a woman, does that only all it does is continue this false narrative that all Black people do is go to jail, get involved in crime, and then die, right? So it's creating this false narrative and continuing that false narrative that is harmful to Black people. And so I think when there is diversity in a newsroom and there is representation in a newsroom of not just Black journalists, but also Hispanic, also Asian American journalists, when you see something like that happening, you can say like, hey, this isn't right. We shouldn't be doing this. Because our white counterparts may not realize that. And that's not to give them a pass, because then we have to also educate them on that, but they may not realize what they are doing because it doesn't affect them in the way that it affects us. And so I know when I was working in Indianapolis, like I would have conversations with families on the scene of a shooting or any type of homicide situation. And I'd be like, hey, I really, really, really need a photo of your loved one. And they're like, well, I don't understand why. And I'm like, well, here's the thing. If you don't provide us with this photo, they may then try to use a mugshot, you know? And it's like, let's work together to put a photo out of this individual that's not a mugshot, right? That's not, you know, we don't do that. Like, I would not allow that to happen on a story that I was working on, but I've seen it happen in other situations and it's just not right. But I do think that, especially since the summer, newsrooms are really examining their own practices, which is an amazing thing to see happening. And just making sure that what they are doing is correct, what they are doing is ethical, and that they really are representing all communities. And it's difficult, right? It's difficult to have that look inside and say like, you know what, maybe we have had some shortcomings over the past, but it's never too late to change course. And my hope is that in the future, we see more and more young Black journalists get involved in the profession, because that is really the only way that things are really going to change quickly.
Exactly. That's how I feel.
Because
oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that a lot of times our story ideas come from our own lived experiences. So if you have a newsroom that is predominantly white, predominantly male, that lives in one specific area, all of your stories that are not your news of the day are going to come from those lived experiences.
Right.
So I always make sure that the stories that I pitch hit at areas that we don't often cover. You know, like that's why I'm doing this story in Lincoln Heights with this woman who started this health center 53 years ago, primarily serving Black and brown individuals, because that's a story that I can relate to. And my white counterparts can't. And I think it's important that it gets on our air.
Exactly. And also with that, like you said, some of this this biases that happens is very, I don't want to use the word innocent, but it's not on purpose. Like they aren't meaning to do that, especially if the whole newsroom is white. But what you said is very important, because it's like, we do need more Black journalists or people of color in those rooms, because some of those people really might want to like start diversifying their stories, but only have white journalists to tell it. It's still not going to be authentic as it could be if you or I were telling the story. So yeah, you're totally right. We need more, brown folk up in there.
And another thing is that it's not difficult to go and make sure that your experts that we're seeing, like if you are doing a story on politics today, the debate, the follow-up to that, like we should be looking for political experts who aren't white men. So yes, you may have to make another call, but it's really important that we are putting out there that the only experts on any subject matter is not a white man. And that's something that I know my station, we are really working on, is making sure that our stories reflect the community that we serve, right? Like Cincinnati is a diverse community. So the experts, the sources that we use should be diverse.
Right.
And it's difficult, I think, sometimes for some people to wrap their head around that concept, because it's like, well, this is the person that they gave me to interview. And it's like, right, but you've interviewed this person how many times?
Exactly.
And there are so many other experts. And it's not hard to find experts who are not white men. It's not hard to find experts who are not white women.
Yeah.
You can do this if you really want to, but it does have to be intentional.
Right. And it might take a little bit more search, like, on LinkedIn.com or whatever, but we're there. We're out there,
Yeah.
So my last couple of questions, well, I guess it kind of harkens back to when you said that your passion came from being a child and seeing news. What would you say, and I guess specifically this is for anyone in America, but if you could hone in on like the Black kids in Columbus that really have a passion for journalism, or see you and they're like, yeah, I want to be like Kyle Inskeep, Local 12. Like, what would you say to them? What would you say to encourage them, even if they don't see their surroundings reflecting what they have inside of them? Like, what would you say if you could talk to them?
I think the most important thing for anyone who is going after their dream or, trying to make it somewhere, and I don't know where that somewhere is, but I think the most important thing is to never give up on yourself. I think a lot of times people see the journey and we see the highlights, right? Like we talk about that I graduated from college, I got this fellowship, then I got a job, and then I got another job, and then I got this job. But we don't often see the low lights. We talk about the highlights, but we don't see the low lights within everyone's story. And I think that Instagram and Facebook and Twitter has created this whole highlight reel, and that's the only thing that you see. But I've had some really difficult moments in between all of those times. And, those difficult moments may actually have been more defining in my own professional career and personal life than some of these successes have been. So I think it's really important for young people to realize that you are going to go places, but there's also going to be these really low points in your journey that you have to navigate through. And I truly believe you learn more from your failures than you ever do from your successes. And I don't often talk about this, but like my first job out of college was actually in Champaign, Illinois, and it was just a horrible fit. It was at a news station that I wasn't really ready for professionally. And I guess you could even say personally at the time. I was 2-3 weeks out of college, and it just didn't work. And so I left very unexpectedly after about a month, but it really rocked with my confidence. And I was like, is this journalism industry for me? Can I do this? And thankfully, you know, I had turned down the fellowship earlier, and then it came back around once they had found out that I was available. And the fellowship really helped to nurture me and get me ready for that first job. So I think I needed that opportunity. And the universe always gives you, I believe, what you need at that moment. And so just trust yourself, you know, but understand that it's a journey, and that there will be moments where you're like, what the heck is happening, right? But in the end, everything will work out. But people don't talk about their failures, and we should talk about our failures
For
more,
sure.
because there's so much more defining, I think, than getting an award or, you know, whatever you want to say. But your failures really help you understand. They provide a lot of clarity in your life as well.
Exactly. Yeah, it's 100% true. People think with any profession that the journey is like linear. Just no, it is like everywhere.
Now.
And amen to the hardships and the failures, because like with me, I'm not gonna make this about me because we don't have that much time. But like I have found the failures has really interrogated my passion. Do you want to do journalism? And me going past those things, it's just like another mountain to climb. I'm like, yeah, I do. And I go over it each time. And yeah, the successes are great. But yeah, when you have those failures and you overcome them, you're like, I love this. Like that just gives you more like of that.
And I mean, I think about how many times I applied for a job and didn't get a job, right? Like there was a job on my last search that I boohooed as a I think I was 28 at the time. I'm 30 now, but so this is like not that long ago. But I really, really, really wanted this job, and I was going back and forth with my agent, and I'm like, this is it, this is it, this is it, and it just did not work out. And I couldn't see at the time. I had no clue why. It was a weekend anchor job, and I was just like devastated. I called off work the next day. Hopefully, my boss at the time isn't watching, but I just could not shake it. And then I think now, had I gotten that job, I would have not been available to receive this job, which then there was a subsequent promotion there. So like the way that the universe, the way that God works is so much bigger than any plan that we have for our own life. So I think to go back to your original question, my advice to any young person right now, especially those in our hometown, is to just trust the timing of your life, and don't try to rush it. You know, it's what is for you is for you. And you can't second guess that.
Right. That is like the best advice. What is for you is for you, because this game in journalism is tough. I mean, there's a lot of us out that want to do it. And I always say if it's going to happen, it will. And if this isn't for me, I'm like, and I had those boohoo moments too, but I'm just like, this just was not for me. Because I have archival evidence in the back where I didn't get stuff that when I didn't get that, actually I got a bigger blessing. So I'm just like, this was not for me. Just let it go. Let go, let God. This just turned into a sermon, and it's not even Sunday. Okay, so last thing, and this is the last thing. This is just for fun. Rapid fire. 7 things. What's your favorite food?
Oh my gosh. Barbecue.
Barbecue. What's your favorite movie?
Oh, this is tough. So I'm not a huge movie watcher.
Really?
I'm not. But if I had to go with my favorite movie, so this is can I give a tie? No, I'm gonna do in this season Brown Sugar.
Brown Sugar? Is that a movie?
Yes.
Oh, I'm off of it.
Oh my, come on. It's Tay Diggs, Sanaa Lathan, Queen Latifah.
Oh.
Yeah. So it's between that, Remember the Titans.
Oh, I love it.
But I'm not a huge movie watcher, but I do. I've just watched Brown Sugar the other day.
Okay. So TV show. What's your favorite?
Oh my gosh,
You
Brittany, you are
probably
killing
don't
me.
even have that much time to watch TV.
No, I watch so much television. That's the problem.
Well.
So, I'm just gonna rattle all my favorites off. I love Scandal. I'm currently obsessed with Schitt's Creek, Insecure. Oh my God, Pose. Oh my gosh, why I could watch television all day. The Real Housewives of Potomac. I love 60 Minutes. I love the Today Show. I'm just all over the place.
Why Potomac though? Is it
So
just?
here's the thing. I used to be an Atlanta watcher. Nene
ruined it.
And then this year, during the pandemic, there was nothing on. And so I started watching Potomac, and they have a different level of like shade that they throw. They throw a different level of shade, right? I like the DC vibes. I know they're in Potomac, but it's right outside of DC. Yeah. But I just like the East Coast. I love Giselle. I love Robin. Mm-hmm. Karen, Monique, and what's her face are crazy, but they're fun. I love Potomac.
So you don't. Atlanta is gone. You don't.
I'm still gonna watch because I love Candy, but Atlanta's been on for a while, right? Like I needed something different.
You're right. Favorite music artist?
Charlie Wilson.
Oh, that's good. One thing that you cannot live without?
Sweet tea.
Sweet tea? I think I saw that, actually. That's hilarious. And the last thing, who's your hero?
My mom. I grew up in a single-family household, and my mom means more to me than anyone because she sacrificed so much for both my sister and I to get where we are today. Mm-hmm. And I think the older that I get, the more that I realize the sacrifice and the things that she did and went without to make sure that we had. Mm. And I remember when I first got a job, I came home and I was like, I don't even want to cook dinner after working 8 hours. And I think like my mom, not only did she cook dinner, she was grading our homework, she was doing the laundry, she was doing everything, and she did it by herself. Mm. And so I give major props to all the single parents out there, but especially the single moms who are raising young Black children, especially right now in this current climate. Yeah. And so because of that, I'm forever indebted to her, and I love her so much. And she watches everything, so I'm sure she's
shout out. Awesome. Thank you so much, Kyle, for doing this. This was so much fun.
Yes,
I appreciate everything you're doing, and you are influencing a lot of lives. Like every time you post something, it's so positive. I'm just like, love it, it's great.
I'm going to end with it, and I don't mean to hijack your interview, but I do think it's important that people realize that that's intentional because I'm trying to combat so much negativity that we see out there because people just want to be negative. And I don't think that it's going to end after this election because I really do think that as a country, as a society, we have kind of turned a really awful corner where everyone just wants to go back and forth, and they want to provide disinformation. So to be honest with you, I'm a little concerned at what's going to happen the day after election day.
Oh, yes.
I really am concerned because we're not going to know immediately who won because of the high number of mail-in ballots. And so I really just hope that people are not negative. They can be negative, right? I just hope people are not rude. I hope that they are not mean to one another as we are waiting for this. But I know they're going to be.
Right.
And I just don't want to see any violence on either side, right. Attacking supporters of the opposite political party, because I think we've just gotten to a point where people don't feel like they can be friends with people who don't agree with them ideologically. Right. And to me, that's a tragedy. Yeah. Because to me, it just shows how far apart we have gotten.
Yeah. And it's funny. You would think, and I understand, yes, being, on the right or the left, polarizing, and you feel like if you, connect with anyone, it's severing ties with who you are for. Mm-hmm. But you would think now what we're dealing with COVID and everything, that would almost strip away how really all we're in this literally together. Like literally in our houses, but nonetheless. But yeah, I'm with you. I try to stay as optimistic as I can with America just because of where we've come from, specifically with our lineage of coming from American slavery and how we've progressed to like the fact that we're two Black journalists. Like that is pretty remarkable. So I just try to keep being optimistic as you are, and hopefully that will help with what's going on.
Hopefully it'll trickle down. Hopefully, I believe that 2021 is going to be a good year. Hopefully we can stop the use of the word fake news, and we can all just move. You know, I really think in 2021 I am going to start a campaign to no longer use the term fake news. It would just be a glorious day.
I will be your number one supporter.
We can do better.
I'll be your first one signing out. Like, thank you. But thank you so much. And can you tell the people where they can, the times to find you on Local 12 real quick?
Yes. Even if you're not in Cincinnati, you can watch Local 12 via our live stream on local12.com. And I am on every evening at 5, 6, and 11 o'clock. So tune in. We need everybody to watch.
Tune in. Yes, everyone. Yeah. Thank you so much, Kyle. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Brittany. Keep doing that incredible work, my friend.
You too. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye. Be right back because someone downstairs is getting loud and I need to tell them to go. So I'll edit all this out, but I'll be back in like 2 seconds.